Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is 13 after 8 a.m. South African time. We will be crossing over to Istanbul in Turkey and to California in the United States. And let's start with you, Wynd Kaufmyn. You are a professor of engineering and you are a volunteer on the flotilla that was meant to be making its way last Wednesday already. But of course, we do know that there's been frustrating delays. The latest one being the fact that one of the African countries, I believe, refused to allow their flag to be flown from the ship. And of course, international law dictates that one does need to have a flag depicting the country of the vessel. Let's understand what that is all about, Wynd, and then we'll also ask you the all-important question, why is it that you're back home in Berkeley, California? But before we get to all of that, you are a professor of engineering, and here you are, a humanitarian and activist, made your way to Istanbul in Turkey, but back home again in the States because the flotilla has not as yet set sail. A very good morning. Welcome to the program. My pleasure entirely to have you on show this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Professor, why is it that you're involved with the flotilla? Have you had previous experience in this type of work? You also told me off air that you're a graduate of the University of Berkeley in California. You've also said to me that it's a very progressive university. Thinking of that university is very, very progressive. Talk to us a little bit about the university and how it shaped your thinking going forward. And here you are now fighting for the rights of the marginalized and the oppressed.
Well, first I want to say the university itself is not progressive. But Berkeley is deeply rooted in radicalism. In the 60s, it was the center of the free speech movement, which was huge, and it was part of the anti-Vietnam War movement, and the demonstrations here led pretty much the country, and eventually those demonstrations did bring an end to the Vietnam War. I actually grew up in the Jewish community of Detroit, Michigan. I came out here to go to school at the University of California in Berkeley. And as a Jewish person, you can't ignore the injustice of the world. But I never thought to do anything about it. But when I moved out to Berkeley, I was so inspired by all the activism that I saw that was trying to do something about the injustice of the world. And so I became an activist. This was back in the early 80s.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm just retired. I retired last academic year, so not even a year yet. But anyway, so for the next 40 years, I worked, I taught full time as a tenured professor at City College of San Francisco, and I was an activist. I went to, my first action was to go to Nicaragua as part of the Central Solidarity movement, because my government was funding the Contras who were trying to overthrow the revolution in Nicaragua. And anyway, for the next 20 years, I was an activist on many different causes, anti-nuclear, anti-war, homeless person advocacy. But I never wanted to look at Palestine because I knew that it wouldn't sit well with my family. And I just didn't want to look at it. There was enough injustice of the world to fight against. So in 2002, after, it was during the second Intifada, and Ariel Sharon went into the West Bank and Gaza and decimated it, I thought, okay, I can't look away anymore. And so I started reading, and I went there and I saw with my own eyes, and I realized the situation was so wildly unjust and horrible that I couldn't turn away anymore. And I started participating in the Palestinian-led nonviolent resistance to the occupation. And I would go in the summers, of the school year. So I did that for 5 summers between 2002 and 2012. When I went to return in 2012, Israel deported me. They jailed me, they detained me, they deported me. So my ban was up, it's a 10-year ban. And I was actually traveling to go back on October 7th.
Ooh.
Yeah. And obviously I didn't make it. The connecting flights were all canceled. All the flights were canceled for the next couple of weeks. And so
Can I ask you this question? Can I jump in here?
Go ahead.
Were you aware that something was going to happen on October the 7th, or was it just sheer coincidence that you were planning to fly in at that
I
time?
had been so grieved that I couldn't go back to see my friends in Palestine and to work for the, in solidarity with the Palestinians against the occupation. And so when I contacted the consulate here, and they told me my ban was lifted, but they still couldn't assure that I'd get in. But I was on the way. I was going to help with the olive harvest. On the morning of very, very early in the morning on October 7th, as I was going to the airport, a friend of mine texted me and said, "Are you still going?" And I just texted back and said, "Well, yeah, of course," and I didn't know what was going on. And by the time I got to the airport, I knew what was going on, but I was hell-bent on getting in. And so I went, but the connecting flight was canceled, and I ended up spending some time in Ireland with a friend of mine. But I came back, and when I found out about, I've been watching with horrification, the unfathomable suffering and genocide that's going on in Gaza. And I've been watching. And so
I'm going to come back to you in a minute or two. Let's get on to Thiago. And what I do want to come back to you with Wynd is I want to talk about the olive harvest. It's been on my bucket list, haven't made it yet. And I also want to talk to you about, from a Jewish person, I want the perspective of the difference between being Jewish and being Zionist, because I think the entire global community have missed the point completely. Yeah. They have honestly and truly missed the point. Thus, we're seeing this outrageous genocide playing out in front of our very eyes. So very good morning to you, Thiago, Avila. You are based in Istanbul right now, but you have also told me you'll be making your way back home. And home, of course, is Brazil. How have you found yourself so passionate about the Palestinian situation, being in Istanbul, being part of the flotilla? What exactly is your story, and why is it that you're making your way back home in a couple of hours?
First of all, good morning, Julie. Good morning, Wynd. Good morning, everyone, all the audience of Salam Media. It's a pleasure being here with you. I'm actually going back home, but just to get back, it's like a small step back to get impulse and come back stronger. I'm just to introduce myself. I'm Thiago Avila, 37 years old, Brazilian internationalist and communicator. And I'm representing Freedom Flotilla Brazil right now and trying to gather a delegation to come here. I'm in contact with the Palestinian cause since 2006, but I didn't get to manage to go to Palestine until 2019, like 13 years after. And before I was like doing everything I could to share, to make people more aware of what was happening in Palestine, writing articles and doing political education about Palestine. But actually, so I knew quite a lot about Palestine when I was there in 2019. But when I was there in the West Bank, in the big cities of the West Bank, also the small villages, also the military checkpoints, and everything that I saw of the how crazy it is to be in an apartheid state, a settler apartheid state, is much worse than I could ever imagine. And from everything that I could read on the books, when I've seen with my own eyes, children being stoned while trying to get to school in Hebron, or people being treated like cattle on a military checkpoint with the rifles pointed in our faces, and crazy facial recognition systems, and settlers taking the water resources, taking the farms, the olive trees, and so many terrible things that I had never seen anything like this. It's like a dystopic state. And it changed my mind completely about Palestine. It gave me a huge admiration for these people because they're so amazing, so resistant, so steadfast. And actually, since 2019, I gathered even more impulse to be a part, to be useful for the Palestinian cause. And then 2023, right now in November, I went to Egypt as well to try to get to the Rafah border to gather humanitarian efforts to help to take medication and food, but we didn't manage to do because of the blockade, the Israeli blockade, the Israeli-U.S. blockade on the Rafah border is very, very tough. I'm here in the flotilla as part of the same struggle to try to be of use, of service for a people that is also inspiring the world. The Palestinian people have given us not only the goggles to see how the world actually works, but also the roadmap to see how to resist and how to defeat the most terrible forces of exploitation, oppression, and destruction on the planet. So I'm so glad to be here, to be of use, and I'm happy to be with you too. I have to go to the airport in a few minutes because my flight got anticipated. I just realized it, but I'm so glad being here with you to be able to share a few words with you as well and to be able to learn from you as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, do you have to leave in the next few minutes, or do you still have time to talk
Yes,
with me on the
actually,
show this morning?
I do.
Pardon?
I have like 10 minutes to be with you.
Okay, let me make the most of having you around. Wynd, I do hope you can just bear with us, please. So let me take advantage before Avila has
Of course.
to leave us. What sort of work were you doing in Palestine? And the other question as well I'd like to explore with you is, of course, we know about the issues in South America. Most of America has the issue around the cutting down of decimating the Amazon forests, what's happening in the jungles, the issue around the drug lords. And we also have situations of the poorest of the poor in South America, different parts, obviously, in South America, and how the poorest of the poor are being marginalized. Some of them are forced to grow crops that will eventually end up with the drug lords to create all sorts of drugs and to push it onto the world markets. How do you see that situation? And I know it's very unfair to ask for a comparison, but we are talking of a very oppressed people in certain parts of South America.
Yes, actually, I totally agree with the way you described, Julie, because us, not only in South America, but also in Africa and also in Asia, and we are part of the global South, actually. So it's a different dynamics of a dependent capitalism that treat us only as primary exporters, and we cannot have any ways to not only to develop, because it would not be enough, the idea of development, because it does not connect with the indigenous people of our continents, and it's most of the time is not very ecological, the idea of development like that, just to produce and produce and produce and produce and produce without realizing what we're doing. But actually the problem is that we live in a system that is based on the exploitation of our workforce and the expoliation of nature, like the pillage of nature. So this basis of the system gives so much trouble for us in the global South that actually I've been arrested so many times in Brazil fighting the ones that from agribusiness that make deforestation, the ones that try to assassinate cities and do real estate speculation. So it's so tough to live in a system that was not made for you, for us, for the 99%. And these systems of of oppression, of dominance. They apply to Brazil, they apply to Colombia, they apply to Angola, they apply to so many places. They apply to all the countries of the global south that have not yet took the way to liberate themselves. So we are talking about a whole world that is oppressed by a system that which is based in the north global north, and that we have to do our best to change it, because what is happening in Palestine is such a huge thing, but it happens in a slower measure everywhere else there is exploitation, there is oppression, and there is the destruction of nature, the turning nature into a merchandise. So we're trying to do our best to change this, and actually Palestine is showing us the way, because when we say in Palestine, we always say that Palestine is a cause that unites all causes, because if you defend nature, you cannot defend people putting concrete into water springs so that they can colonize a land. If you defend nature, you cannot agree to uprooting olive trees that have been there for 1,000 years. If you defend nature, you cannot agree with animal exploitation and animal mistreating that Israel does on Palestine, and right now animals dying of hunger as well. But of course, actually, we cannot agree with everything Israel does to humans in Palestine. The Israeli state, the Zionist entity, do what no human should suffer ever, ever, ever. And so many war crimes and so many things. So we are actually seeing the Palestinian cause as a way to liberate, of course, Palestine, to build a free Palestine, but also to build a free world. People are finally understanding that what they've been taught since they were very, very young, that the civilized countries, that the countries that were a model of development, a model of prosperity, a model of beauty, a model of self-made people, they are actually based on exploitation. They're based in an oppressive state that when you don't agree with them, even though you're a citizen of their own country, even though you're a college student, even though you're a peaceful protester, you have to be crushed. And that's what they're doing on college campuses, encampment, on protests, on roadblocks, on peaceful.
Let me ask you the final question, Avila, before I let you go. Um, how did you feel the first time you went into Palestine and saw that apartheid wall that was being built by the Zionist entity, and making the comparison with the wall that Trump had built or was in the process of building during his tenure as President of the United States? How did that make you feel? And I would have been outraged, but I'm kind of wondering, when you looked at that parallel with the walls, the apartheid walls, Trump has done that to keep the Mexicans and the South Americans out of the United States of America.
Julie, I had a technical problem here because of the connection, but I just heard the last sentence about United States and South America. Can you repeat? Is that it? How we are related?
I'm talking about the apartheid wall. When you saw the apartheid wall in Palestine, and knowing that Trump had started building a wall to keep the South Americans out of America, the supposedly illegal migrants into the United States, that must have been quite a blow to you, a reminder of what's happening back in South America is playing out here with the Palestinian people.
Yes, it is. It is, Julie. Actually, what we see that the genocidal experiment that the Zionist entity and the imperialist forces from the world, led by the U.S., are doing with the Palestinian people, they are trying to implement everywhere else. So when I was in Palestine in 2019, a few months before, we brought a Palestinian friend to Brazil with us to give lectures at universities, at the social movements as well, the work that we do everywhere all the time as well. But he was coming to Brazil to share his experiences. And when we got to Rio de Janeiro, Lemão slum, which is a very huge slum with more than a million people living there, and he was looking at the tanks, the police tanks, and the police equipment, and most of them, some of the rifles, some of the training, so many things were bought from Israel that had a very cruel seal that was saying it's field tested, which I was actually tested in the Palestinian people. And so we could
Oh,
see, and he said, look, this is the thing, this is the place in the world that looks like the most with Palestine that I've ever seen. Like this is a seed of a future military checkpoint. And when we see the Trump's wall to prevent migration and to actually to dominate, because that is indigenous occupied territory, and then it was a territory taken away from Mexico by the US. And when we see the so many things, the police doctrine, the police state that they're trying to build, we can see that we have to be successful with the liberation of Palestine, because otherwise they will export this genocidal, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, etc. state everywhere else. So what we do is that we say all the time that the fate of the Palestinian people is connected to the fate of the rest of the world. If we don't win this struggle for liberation, the consequences are terrible for everyone else. So
okay,
what we
finally, I'm
yes,
going to have to let you go now. Um, are you hopeful that the flotilla will be allowed to set sail? And will you hopefully make it back in time to be on one of those ships?
yes, Julie, I'm actually positive that we'll sail. We The flotilla has been going on for so many years, and all the time we had a lot of difficulties. We have been sabotaged. Israel drilled holes on the ships. Israel made bureaucratic warfare. Israel attacked the ships. Israel killed some participants, 10 people in 2010. They have been doing everything to stop the flotillas, and yet we keep on sailing because we cannot stop sailing until Palestine is free. And actually, when people think the flotilla is a doing of heroes, we are only a small fraction of the courage, of the risk that the Palestinian people suffer every single day. Therefore, what we're doing here is to be useful, and I'm sure we will sail like every other edition. We have also sailed, and this will not stop us. As actually, if Israel thought that doing this bureaucratic warfare, pressing the Guinea-Bissau government to remove their flags, they would be stopping the flotilla. They actually didn't thought this through, because we are now much stronger. The whole world is watching, and next time we'll sail in a few days or weeks. We will be sailing with millions and billions of people that are camping on college campuses, doing roadblocks, blocking the entrance of arms factories, blocking ports with Israeli weapons, blocking ports from with U.S. weapons trying to get to Israel. So we're part of a global uprising that will not stop until we have our definitive victory, which is the end of genocide, the end of occupation, the decolonization of that land, which is to remove Zionism, that supremacist and racist settler ideology, and to liberate Palestine and the whole world. So what is happening here, we talked about in history books, and I'm actually humbly very glad to be a part of it.
Thiago, Avila, thank you indeed for your insights. We hope and pray that you have a safe journey home, and you will be coming back to Istanbul to join the flotilla. Thank you indeed for your time. We're going for an ad break, and as soon as we're back, we're going to be talking with Wynd Kaufmyn. Or Kaufmyn, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, and we're going to talk further on the issue of the flotilla. Can you just correct me there, please, Wynd?
Kaufmyn, but Kaufman is fine as well.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. We'll be back with you in a minute or two.
Financial goals feeling out of reach? Yassin Badat Financial Advisory is here to turn your aspirations into achievements. Our dedicated team, armed with a history of success, is ready to guide you through the complex nature of financial and investment planning. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to the game, our personalized solutions cater to your unique goals and risk appetite. Trust in our commitment to transparency, integrity, and excellence. Ready to unlock a world of financial freedom? Partner with us today. Call Yasin Badat Financial Advisory at +27333462071 or visit www.yasinbadat.com. Yasin Badat Financial Advisory, guiding you to financial success.
Send food and send kindness to those who have lost their homes and have been plunged into poverty. For those who are a meal away from starvation, a food parcel means an entire family can eat this Ramadan. That's the power of food. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Approximately 2/3 of the population of Yemen are in severe need of humanitarian aid. With Ashraful Aid, you can make a difference. For just 700 rands, you can provide a hamper to a family in need. Visit our website today at www.ashrafulaid.org.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. It is exactly 8:40 a.m. South African time. We're going to be joined now once again by Wynd Kaufmyn.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue talking about the situation around the flotilla taking much needed aid to Gaza. And we will be talking with Wynd right up until before we go for our news bulletin. That's just before 9 o'clock. So thank you indeed for your time, Wynd, and for your patience to allow me to talk with our first guest from Brazil, of course. That is Thiago Avila. Apparently you do know him. I presume you met him in Istanbul.
I met him just in the last 2 weeks. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to my question regarding the question I put to you before the ad break. This confusion around, Jewishness and Zionism, or being a Jew, does that automatically mean that you're a follower of Zionism?
No,
what
not
exactly is it? And are there movements within the Jewish community that are trying to educate Jewish people at large about this confusion and not to get caught up in this very nefarious idea of being Jewish automatically makes you a Zionist?
Yeah. I really am grateful for the question, because I think it is so important for people to realize that there is a huge difference between being Jewish or being Zionist, and I'm also going to add, or being pro-Israel. Those are 3 very different buckets, and each one is complicated. But I'll start out by saying that even at the very beginning of the Zionist movement in the late 1800s, there were anti-Zionist Jews. There were Jews even at that time that saw that the Zionism that was meant to take over the Jewish nation state was inherently flawed and would necessitate a genocide. And they saw that even back then. And I think that now, in present day, there's more and more Jewish people that are waking up and realizing that Zionism is actually anti-Jewish, because Jewish values are about humanity and justice and it's certainly not genocide. and the Israeli state, which is a nation state, which claims to be a Jewish state and claims to speak for the Jewish people worldwide, does not. It does not speak for me. It does not speak for hundreds of thousands. And they are increasingly in numbers and in the strength of their voice. There's an organization here in the United States called Jewish Voice for Peace. And it is an anti-Zionist Jewish identified organization. I also want to just give a little bit of nuance. Zionism can mean different things. In the best sense of the word, it just means that Jewish people need a safe place to live. And to me, that's the best of what Zionism has to offer. Once it says, no, it has to be in this land that's occupied by this people, and we've got to push these people out and claim it for ourselves, that's actually not in the interests of the Jewish people, because I actually think that because of what the Israeli state has done, anti-Semitism has increased because of the confusion of equating Jewishness with the Zionist state or the Israeli state. So it's actually very complicated, but and I do think that Zionists intentionally conflate the words. They want the definition, they want the legal official definition of anti-Semitism to be anti-Zionism or anti-Israel. And it's playing with semantics, and it's doing it in a way that's obscuring the truth, because if the truth were known, people would not be supportive of the Israeli state in what it's doing.
So, Wynd, how do you then respond to a lot of world leaders, a lot of American politicians, Biden himself, and in the UK, Rishi Sunak is suggesting, and Germany for that matter, and France, well, the entire global north, governments in those countries are saying that they support the Zionists in Israel. They support the genocide because the Israelis are supposedly defending themselves against terrorism. They're defending themselves against Hamas and all terrorist activities. But when you look at the scale of the onslaught, when you look at the scale of the genocide, it doesn't balance. There's absolutely no balance at all.
No, absolutely not. And this, they're very good with propaganda and manipulating language. To say Israel has a right to defend itself is kind of a non-statement. Everybody has the right to defend themselves. But let's really look, is what Israel is doing, is it actually defense? And I say clearly, no. It is not defense. I mean, just looking at the numbers and the scale and the timeline of, civilian deaths and suffering, it's clearly not defense. But more than that, Israel is occupying Gaza. It's the occupying power. So they're defending themselves against their own, people that they're supposed to be in charge of taking care of and their welfare. The other thing is, even back in 2010 with if you look at some of the International Court of Justice decisions, they've actually ruled that what they're doing in their own occupied territory is not defense. If they were doing it in their own territory, it would be. But what they're doing, it's an aggression, and all they have to do is just leave the occupation, their occupied territories, and it would be over. It's been said that if Hamas just surrendered, things would be fine. Well, I say if Israel just withdrew to its own territory, even though it's not its own territory, but that's a different story, things would be fine. But the problem is that the Zionist project has always wanted all of Palestine. There was never an intention to share it. And so we have the inevitable conclusion of Zionism before our eyes today.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. I do have another guest standing by to talk with me. So very quickly to the all-important question, and I would like to have more ongoing conversations with you in the future.
Sure.
Let's ask the all-important question. Are you confident that the flotilla is going to happen? You're back home in the United States, and should you get the news that it's going to happen within the next 2-3 days, will you be able to get yourself back into Istanbul in time to join the flotilla?
Yes, I intend to go back when it's ready to sail, and we will not stop fighting to get it to sail, and it will sail. I actually think this is the most important thing I could be doing right now, because the world needs to stop for Gaza. It's like what is going on there is so horrific and unfathomable. If people actually knew the truth, then everybody would be joining me and the flotilla, and or going on land and just like doing mass and marches into Gaza to bring food. It's so ridiculous that the Israeli government feels threatened by this flotilla, and is stopping civilians, unarmed, nonviolent civilians, from delivering desperately needed aid, which actually they've been told they need to do by the International Court of Justice, is that they have to, start allowing more aid in. Well, they haven't, and it's clearly they are in breach of international law. The blockade was always in breach of international law. They have no right to board the boats. I'm not going to be completely idealistic and say that we're definitely going to get in, but I think we have a good chance of getting in, especially if all of the eyes of the world are on the flotilla. In fact, that's one of the hashtags, is all eyes on deck, and taking off from the.
It's a nice play on words there. Yeah. I like it.
And I think that if the world watches, we will get in and we will deliver the humanitarian aid. But more importantly, we will break the blockade, the illegal siege, and that will open it up and hopefully open up the eyes of the world for what's really going on. And hopefully that will change it.
Wynd, Kaufmyn, wonderful talking with you. It's so refreshing to speak with a Jewish person and, getting the view of the Jewish voice, knowing that there's a clear and a distinct difference between being Jewish and being Zionist. And all I can say to you is keep that flag flying as high as you possibly can, keep safe, and we pray for the success of the flotilla. And we also pray that the Palestinians, get their much hard-earned, their liberation and emancipation.
Absolutely.
Inshallah. Amin, amin, thumma amin. Thank you indeed. Lovely talking with you. Till the next time, please be Godspeed.
Bye.
It's exactly 8:52 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. We will be moving along now, and at the top of the hour, we'll be talking with, we won't be talking with him, but Zai Jadwat's going to bring the news bulletin to us, and then we'll be moving into the second hour of the show.
This is Salam Media.